And
Okay,
we're live to YouTube.
Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'd like to welcome everybody. This meeting is now called to order. Mayor Davis sends his regrets. I would like to remind members of the.
You mute, Councillor. You mute.
How's that?
That's better.
You're
Yeah.
back.
Well, I want to remind members of the Mohawk Lake District Working Group of a few procedural rules to assist the meeting in operating as efficiently as possible. All members remain muted when not speaking for the meeting to reduce feedback. All web cameras for Mohawk Lake District Working Group members shall be turned on. Staff will be requested to join the video meeting should the need to answer questions arise. Persons who have registered for the meeting and who are speaking to items on the agenda will be brought into the meeting upon the introduction of the item. Any member of the Mohawk Lake District Working Group should indicate they wish to speak by pressing the raise hand button on the participation list screen, or raising your hand if I miss you. In the event of connection service interruption occurs that affects quorum of the Mohawk Lake District Working Group, we may recess the meeting for up to 15 minutes to regain quorum. If quorum is not achieved, the meeting will be adjourned. All members of the Mohawk Lake District Working Group participating via online video conference will vote by physical show of hands. The chair will indicate to leave your hands raised until determine the results of the vote. Finally, thank you for your patience. Are there any declaration of conflict of interest for the items listed on today's agenda? Seeing none. Members of the work group, we have one delegation for today's meeting. Each delegation will have 10 minutes inclusive of questions of the working group in keeping with the City of Brantford procedural section 15.6.2. Please ensure all comments are directly related to the matter before the Mohawk Lake District Working Group. Item 3.3 is a community group expression of interest process update. And we have Rita Marie Hadley and Scott Lyons from Lansdowne Children's Center. I'd ask Rita Marie Hadley and Scott Lyons to come forward to speak to the item 3.3 community group expression of interest process update. Please note that you have up to 10 minutes for your remarks, inclusive of questions of the working group. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. We hear you okay, Rita Marie? Thank you. I'll just get right into it. We only have 10 minutes, but just first of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to give a little bit of an update. There's a lot that has gone on. It's been about last May, I think, since we last brought you up to speed. Right after that meeting last spring, Lansdowne was awarded some funding from the province to do a design study for our new build. Involved architects and functional planners, and occurred over the last 6 months last year. And in December of 2019, we had an open house to share some of that and get feedback from the community. Many of you were there, and we appreciate that very much. And as a result of that, there were a few changes that we made from feedback from community members and from city planners, and many of yourself and Rita Marie will speak a little bit to that. We have been in conversation with some of the other groups that have suggested they might be interested in locating there as well, as far as how we can work together for parking and other things like that.
Can I interrupt for just 1 second, asking Patrick if you could advance the slide, please? Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay. Mostly there's pretty much what we're speaking to right there. So spring this year, we've just done some costing briefs, and a full business case has gone into the ministry on Lansdowne's behalf now. So many of you will know this has been in process for close to 10 years, probably, since I was the chair of the board at that time. And we have done what we have done. We've picked sort of the spot that's been indicated as a possibility for us on this site. And so we're just going ahead because of all the work that needs to be done through our ministries and capital planning and everything. So this summer, we also just finished a campaign feasibility study. We're looking at total cost, the capacity of the community to support Lansdowne when we get to fundraising as well, and have just had phenomenal support all the way through from city, from the community and everything. So I will leave that there just as a bit of an introduction, and Rita Marie will walk through just some of the changes as a result of feedback from where we were last December at the open house that many of you saw. And keeping in mind, it's just 10 minutes. We'll leave a little bit of time for questions if there are any. Marie?
Thank you. Next slide, please, Patrick. Vanna. What we wanted to do is quickly remind folks, because as Scott said, it has been some time we've been working through this and you have many priorities on your plate. The recap is we're at 25,000 square feet on 2.3 acres. And we've done the planning of the projections so that we can serve the community well to say what will the population and the service volumes be in 20 years from now, 5, 10, 20-year increments, so that we're looking at appropriate planning. And that's what's forcing us to move from this site. Also, the parking spots, which we cannot safely accommodate, even with your support of the bylaw changes to park on the street. We serve over 3,000 kids a year, and there's another 2,200 who are waiting for service. And so our building and our space restricts us from serving our community's kids. It means we don't comply with the provincial accessibility requirements. And so we aren't walking the talk around kids who have disabilities being in an accessible environment. And we need to make sure we match the provincial standards as one of the 21 children's treatment centers in the province. The plans, we were delighted at the work with the planning department to see how this could be a strong presence as a gateway to the Mohawk Lake District and a fit for that space there. The design study allowed us to reduce somewhat the acreage and the square footage we need, and it comes out with a model that's 3 stories with a 4th floor shell, and that's how we can expand and ensure that we have a capacity to grow for the future on the same site. The space is 120,000 square feet, which consolidates space that we have to lease off-site. So that allows us to future-proof some of the vulnerability we have around requiring other agencies to lease us this space. And also the safety, which is a really big concern for us. We shudder about the possibilities of kids and families who are injured in vehicular traffic, which is hard to avoid where we are on a very busy corner of Mount Pleasant and Colburn Street West. So the safety that we can look at on that site sees a setback from the rail lines, also access from the parking lot without crossing the driveway, all really important things when you think about it, and because we want to be safe in the neighborhood of the Eagle Place area. Next slide, please. Scott and I will probably tag team on speaking to this, and certainly the members of the planning department present would be able also to speak to this. We originally had some models up for our open house, and in looking at the feedback and the preferences that we heard from City Hall leaders, we did a pivot so that the building would be significant on the site. We did all of the usual planning studies around time of day, light exposure, wind, etc. But the important thing being, how does it address the communities? How does it address the bottom of Murray Street, Greenwich, and Mohawk, etc.? So that was responsive. We had the architects change that around after having the feedback at the December open house. Next slide, please. This is more details on it, and at 360 parking spaces. This is important to the point that Scott was referencing in terms of our work with the one entity that has been assured of space on here, that is the Industrial Heritage Museum, of them planning together with a venue for the theatrical presentations that they knew they would be short of parking spaces. And for us, looking at beyond our current parking needs, we need 170 right now, for which we have 73 parking spots. So this has the capacity for us to partner with neighbors adjacent and to be a good neighbor on that property. Next slide, please. To give you an idea about why this is meant as a neighborhood amenity, we have you some details of how things stack out and lay on the land. And particularly, you see there is a pool there, and there are first floor spaces that community use would be appropriate for. And knowing that certainly it's important for our clients to be in an accessible environment on the bus route and able to be reached, we also know this could be reached by neighbors in the Eagle Place area who could make use of the pool area, of meeting spaces in that admin boardroom right off of the main entrance. And as we go into the areas that have respite and the safety of it, autism, the significant services there that our agency offers, it also offers clinic space as well too. Next slide, please, will show you that as we go up in stories, the alignment of these has that shell space on the top, which we would envision renting in the short term and making use of for community service partners so that we can co-locate them for clients who need more than one service, but also looking at how can we make this financially viable. The final photo that we have for you will show you how these all come together. There is a sense of not wanting something that is too tall, but when looking at the site, it was felt to be quite appropriate by the architects who, the first visit to town, they went to the site to look and say, how do things fit together? And then connected with planning department personnel to understand the Mohawk Lake District plan. Next slide shows how they stack up on top of each other. Again, just to give a sense of visualizing, knowing that the background to this has been very specifically looking at children's needs for the treatment, how does staff fit into the space, and how does this all stack together. And finally, we get to our final slide of just how does this come together. Of course, I say final after looking at this. This has people breaking out in applause here at Lansdowne, just imagining that the brightness that the glass shows there, that the safety of being able to walk and not worry that you're crossing a street and potentially injured, but enough safe spaces for parking that has us keeping our dreams alive. And the final slide is our value proposition and the urgency of this, where you hold much of the determination about this very important development in Brantford on this site. It's a community and neighborhood asset we see. The accessibility to our priority neighborhood. Because we geo-map all of our clients upon intake, we know where our clients are coming from throughout Brant, Haldimand, and Norfolk, and particularly within Brantford. We know that location here would well serve the priority neighborhoods it would be adjacent to. It would be an economic driver in terms of post-COVID, the election cycle, the stimulus that we are expecting, and the capital investments and job creation. Patrick, if you can move to the next slide, please. We are also talking about timing as a critical point in the life of a child and in the life of the 5,000 kids, if you count the ones that we currently are able to serve, the 3,000 plus the 2,200 who are waiting. They grow up and need to have services at critical times. And so when we're crowded, it lengthens their wait time before they can be served. So that's what's critical. The funding cycle, we are pleased that the province did fund this design phase. However, further commitments are dependent upon land commitment. Large-scale procurement, as this is, it's a big project. It has a timeline to get in the ministry pipeline, and they would require a memorandum of understanding to acknowledge to have an acknowledgement of the city's commitment around land so that we can compete with other communities who are also looking at doing this development. So that's the political alignment as well. We also need to do our own fundraising. And as Scott mentioned, the capital campaign is showing great promise around the potential, but as with the province and provincial funders, donors also want to see a commitment. They want to know where they are putting their funds and what that's tied to. And timing, we feel, is critical in terms of that potential economic stimulus in the next 12 months. Scott, how would you wrap that up?
Yeah, conscious of our time, we probably used the 10 minutes. I think just in summary and without it looking like we're being very, very presumptuous here, because understanding there is, a process still that is yet to come. But we know, and the community knows, that Lansdowne needs new space. The province and our ministry is now supporting it. We got funding for them, and they said, go out, design your building. We said, well, here's a spot we're maybe hoping to get. Let's just use that for now, and we'll design the building with that sort of thing in mind, so that we're a little bit of chicken and the egg. We can't wait for one, wait for another. So we're kind of just hedging our bets, trying to ensure that we will be ready if, as Marie said, if there's stimulus funding coming out of our economic situation right now, later this year or into next year, that will be shovel ready. So as we just walk with you through the remainder of this process on into the fall, very excited. And that's why you're seeing us sort of having taken it so far on a spot really that we totally understand Lansdowne has no entitlement to, but we are super glad for the support of the community and this committee and council. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita Marie and Scott. I do have a question, Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Congratulations. Great presentation. Great facility. Would there be trails on, say, maybe too early yet, but do you plan on having trails and outdoor amenities for summer usage? And could you give a quick overview of what that may look like?
Oh, yes, yes, yes. In fact, our kids are very vocal about that. That was identified by the young people participating, because in the middle of our courtyard here at Lansdowne, we have a horticultural program. We have a sidewalk around the external perimeter of our building. So that's what we're confined to right now, our courtyard and that. But there's a high dependence and a very strong commitment by the young people and by our therapists in terms of programming using the natural environment. And so the lovely drawings that our architects drew very much look at the surrounding area, how we connect with the trails, so knowing what's adjacent in terms of the Mohawk Lake around. And it was very much understanding what some of the future plans are for the entire Mohawk Lake district. And that got great support in terms of our plans for our recreation, as well as very practical physical therapy.
Thank you very much. I've got more questions, Mr. Chair, but I think I'd like to give the opportunity to somebody else who may have a question.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Rita, Scott. Good work. It looks great so far. Wonderful. A few design questions for you. It's tempting to build more than what you need in order to serve future needs, correct? The space, the vacant space proposed at the top of the building, is that going to serve us into 35, 45, 2055? Or do you need to build another story on top of that yet while we're at it?
Our understanding, based upon some very detailed analysis of our work, client by client, and projecting what different methodologies are, is that the 3 stories should serve us in this period, but projecting to the future, the added story on the top, which is around 28,000 square feet. That should give us the ability to be moving forward. Now, knowing that building codes change over time, it's hard to project too much further into the future, but the other parts that require consideration are different ways that people use common spaces, and therapy spaces and office spaces may change over time.
And a follow-up, Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Just because of COVID, are there any remote positions that can stay in other locales, other places in your satellite areas as well?
That's a great question, because that's a part of what, when we sent in our post-construction operating plan budget to the ministry this summer, was looking at the largely post-COVID planning that we have to say what will be different. So what currently, for instance, we have virtual care suites we've set up on site here at Lansdowne for the services that staff need to be here to provide. In addition, speech therapy is what most lends itself to being done with a green screen and working remotely. Physical and occupational therapy, not as much. And so we've made some adjustments and are working with our architects as to say, what is the design industry looking at in terms of how that adjusts the kind of space we need? Because we are in the phase of bringing more staff back on site as we've resumed more of our in-person services, it also adds more space needs because of the requirement to distance people. And so even though we have rotating shifts of people being on site 3 days, off site 2 days, we also can't fit as many people into the same space. So while there's some gains because of our ability to work remotely and for business continuity, there are also some added space requirements for infection prevention and control.
Yeah, I'm along with Councilor Adley. I have more questions, but I can save them for later. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's more than enough time. Thank you. But we will be dealing with this shortly, so stay tuned. Thank you for your presentation, Marie Hadley and Scott Lyons. And we are very appreciative of everything that Lansdowne does in our community. And we're so happy that we have them.
Thank you.
So next on our agenda is 3.1. I have a presentation and Tara is going to provide a presentation on update.
Thank you, Councillor Carpenter and all members, as well as all the community members for joining us today and accommodating the rescheduled meeting. So I appreciate everyone's time. I'm letting you know that I'm going to cover 3 areas of the agenda in my presentation and then take questions at the end. So I will be covering the project status, the update on the Mohawk Lake Rehabilitation Cleanup Project, as well as an update on the community group's expression of interest process. Patrick, can I get the presentation on? Great. So let's move to slide 3, please. So this is a reminder of the study area and the preferred plan that was endorsed by Council in June 2019. The vision for this unique area is to recognize the immense historical and natural assets that already exist here and complement them with the creation of a cultural, community, and recreational hub. Next slide. This plan is a result of many years of community engagement, and the most recent one generated over 600 responses from the community. So what we heard could be summarized by what you see here on the screen, which is be a destination, be beautiful, be a hub of services for the entire community, and generate economic development, taxes, and improve property values. Next slide. So this is a more detailed version of the plan that was endorsed by Council in June. Pending final Council approval later this year, it shows how specific areas are intended to be subdivided to accommodate the range of land uses that were desired by the community. This overall plan is intended to be a mixed use development that addresses the vision for a cultural and community and recreational hub. This plan will accommodate ground floor office and commercial uses, as well as upper floor residential in where you see orange parcels, community services and other institutional uses in the blue parcel, as well as the orange parcels. The existing Military Heritage Museum and the future Industrial Heritage Center can be accommodated in the purple areas. And a large green space is envisioned for a future park and open space that can accommodate large events, such as Canada Day celebrations. I know it's hard to imagine those coming back right now, but it is hoped that we can have those kinds of events in the future. The Pink Gateway Corridor from downtown Brantford is intended to accommodate commercial and residential uses. And Mohawk Lake and Mohawk Canal Corridor are recommended to be designated as a cultural heritage landscape to highlight the historical significance of this area. It's recommended that a promenade feature be developed to support recreational activities and views along this corridor. So while the various colored parcels seen on this slide are shown in this particular configuration as a general land use framework, it's intended to be flexible as well, and components may be tweaked further as more specific development applications are known. Next slide. Back in June last year, after we received Council's endorsement of the preferred plan, the next stage was to vet the plan from a technical standpoint. Is it feasible? Would there be environmental impacts as a result of the development? What additional infrastructure would be required to support the new uses? Therefore, the proposed concept plan was analyzed from 6 different disciplines. So here are the results, and please note it's just a snapshot of the results, but I can take questions after the presentation. So first, the land use compatibility assessment defines whether the proposed development is generally feasible to implement despite the presence of existing industries in the area. The vibrations associated with the active rail spur line, which sees 2 slow-moving rail cars about that run once per week, are actually well below the ministry standards, so they aren't anticipated to impact future development. Detailed noise and odor impact analyses would need to be conducted when specific development applications are received, but current levels aren't an issue. So current levels aren't an issue, and several mitigation strategies can be implemented. The environmental impact study confirmed the proposed concept plan has no direct impact to plant species or wetland habitat, and many animal species can actually be accommodated in other habitat in the area, such as Mohawk Park, which isn't intended to be disturbed. There may be some indirect impacts due to construction work, but the likelihood and magnitude of these impacts are expected to be low. Again, further analysis would be required once specific development applications are received. The third analysis was the economic standpoint, which is to confirm whether there is market support for this type of development, and indeed there is. It's identified that the city can expect future revenues from land sales, development charges, building permit fees, and future municipal taxes if all or some of the lands are sold. Recent transactions and development applications in the area confirm that the private market is interested in developing lands in this area. And you may recall that the gateway portion of the study area actually sold to a private developer last year. Now, in response to the impacts of COVID-19, as we've heard already, we do recognize that the situation can change, particularly with respect to institutional and office uses. So we will explore ways to add flexibility to this plan to ensure that we can respond to any changes in the future. Next. Continuing on, the transportation study ensures the proposed new development will function properly in terms of traffic flow and adequate parking. There will be at least 2 new roads in the preferred concept plan. The transportation study makes recommendations on how and which intersections in the area can be improved. It also recommends active transportation options such as bike lanes and bus routes. And with that, reduce parking standards to help make development more sustainable and economical, leaving more land for actual buildings and green spaces. Next, the functional servicing plan is used to identify what infrastructure upgrades are required to service the development. The report concluded there are existing water and sanitary lines that do support the development, with one exception. The existing sanitary sewer on Greenwich Street does require an extension to support development north of the spur line, but further analysis would be required at a later date to determine how to extend that line. Last of all, the cultural heritage study was a continuation of the 2016 analysis that recommended the area was a good candidate for cultural heritage landscape. In the recent study, it was confirmed that 23 cultural heritage resources are significant and should be protected through an official plan designation. Additional heritage impact assessments are recommended for select properties to confirm that the cultural heritage value is documented and retained where appropriate. So those are the results. Overall, the studies do confirm the technical feasibility of the endorsed plan. As noted, this plan is a general land use framework, and when specific development applications are put forward, they will require more detailed analyses to nail down their specific requirements. Next. Lastly, this slide describes where we are in the project work program. Due to COVID-19, there was a 4-month delay moving forward. We are now back on track. We're now working on completing the supporting reports for implementation, such as the official plan, policy, and urban design.
Did we lose you, Tara?
I believe.
Sorry, Councillor Carpenter. Tara's just had a bit of a technical issue. We're just getting her back up and running.
Wasn't sure whether it was me. I've been having them too.
All right, we'll just be 1 minute.
All right, sorry about that, everyone. I'm gonna just come on to Nicole's screen. My computer battery died of all times to do that. My apologies. Just reiterating that we are on track to take this project to completion towards the end of this year, anticipated sometime in November. Okay, so that is the update on the project update. I'm just going to move ahead to item 3.2, which is an update on the Mohawk Lake Rehabilitation and Cleanup Project. So a reminder that the city secured federal funding to complete several components to determine what the water quality was for Mohawk Lake and Canal, and a plan to improve that water quality. The conclusions found that Mohawk Lake water quality does resemble basically a stormwater pond, but that's not surprising because most of the water is from urban runoff. In August 2020, the city completed the filing process for the environmental assessment report for public and agency review. And earlier this year, in a staff report, short, medium, and long-term remedial measures were identified. Per the federal funding agreement, selected short-term measures will be implemented, such as 3 oil and grit separators, and the Shallow Creek Park retrofit, and the West Canal restoration, which will improve quality of the urban runoff to the lake and canal systems. Medium and long-term measures will be addressed in the city's 10-year and beyond capital planning process, subject to council approval. So that's the status of that project. Unfortunately, our project lead for that, Nahed, was unable to attend today's rescheduled meeting, but I can take any questions that you have regarding the project to him and get those responses. Now, the last item to address in this presentation is item 3.3, the community group's expression of interest update. So where we are with the expression of interests update is just to remind you what the mandate of this group is, which was amended in July 2019, that the working group meet to review the requests of the community groups that are interested in relocating to the district and report back to council with recommendations as to how to address the community groups' requests. Next slide. The list here shows you which groups have expressed an interest previously, and then an update as of August 2020, whereby some groups have withdrawn and others are still waiting to decide pending on other decisions. Those who continue to be interested are still being kept up to date on the status of the plan. All of them were informed of this meeting, and many of them are watching the meeting today on the YouTube channel. So where we left off last year was to receive information about each group's operation and intended services. This helped us to identify what land uses these groups were associated with and should they relocate here. We wanted to be sure that every land use was analyzed from a technical standpoint. And as you heard me say, we did confirm that there were no issues with the new land uses, even those associated with the community groups. Now, if any of the community groups do relocate here, they do have to fill out a formal development application and complete additional detailed analysis, such as noise and odor studies, to confirm appropriate separation distances and other building design to make sure that they are continue to be compatible within the area. At this stage in the process, it is important to note that council consider the decision on the community groups through a separate process from the decision and approval of the Mohawk Lake District Plan. What I mean by that is council can improve the vision and the land uses that are proposed in the plan, while the request for the land by the community group should occur separately once the Mohawk Lake District Plan is approved. The mandate of this working group is to make recommendations to council as to how to address those community groups. And you now know that the types of uses proposed by the community groups are technically compatible with the vision in the surrounding neighborhood. Ultimately, this plan does set the table for any of those groups to be located here if council wishes, but the task force eventual recommendation and subsequent council approval and final decision regarding whether they sell the land, divide it up, is complicated and does require a separate decision-making process involving staff from legal and real estate services. The city's legal and real estate department are working now on a process, and we intend to bring back their guidance at a future meeting. We anticipate there will be a second stage of the expression of interest process led by this working group and with staff support. And of course, there will be adequate time for the community groups to respond. We are aiming for another meeting in early October. So I just wanted to emphasize here, I'll ask you to switch the slide, Patrick, that at this point, no community group has received any promise to date, but we are aware of every community group's interest to date, and that in general, while they can be accommodated in the plan, specific placement or design of the buildings still has to be confirmed, firstly through submitting a planning application, but also confirming with further technical studies, and of course, pending the decision of the working group as well. So the last thing I wanted to advise as well for any of the groups that are interested in these properties is that there is so I'll go to the last slide, 13, please. There is a certificate of property use registered on property title for all the former brownfield lands. And what this is a provincial document that outlines what is required to ensure that future development occurs safely. These requirements include proper building ventilation and foundation barriers, soil caps such as asphalt or a certain amount of grass or soil to act as a physical barrier to the previously impacted soil. All these new requirements are outlined in the document called a certificate of property use, and I can share with any community groups who are interested so that they can understand what their requirements are should they decide to relocate here. Okay, so I appreciate everyone's patience with this presentation, and I am now ready to take your questions.
Thank you, Tara. I have three on the list so far: Councillor Outley, Councillor Martin, and Councillor Vanderstelt. Councillor Outley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Tara. Tara, have any studies been done yet on getting water to flow through the canal?
I will verify that through the project leading ahead, but I do think that that was certainly something they identified as an issue, that the proper flow of the water. And if that's not a short-term measure that they're going to fix, it may perhaps be a medium to long-term plan. I will ask him.
And Tara, would you know if there are, I've seen similar canals in different countries, and where they dried up and it just became a big drainage ditch. They installed barriers or dams so that the water would build up and then flow over a dam and then flow into the next area, and that would flow into another area. So it's very beautiful and attracted ducks and wildlife and the occasional trout. I don't think so. But I sort of visualize in that mind, and I've probably fed up with me saying this, that we beautify that canal section with nice flowering shrubs and some seats and benches on either side. It could be just spectacular when the water plants. I'm very interested in that particular part of it. And knowing how that part of it's progressing. I see that as, like the lake, is a key part of everything else that we build around it. So thank you, Tara.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Councillor Outley. Councillor Martin.
Thank you. I see the Children's Safety Village is on the list. I thought they found a new location in the county somewhere.
Through you to Council Martin, it's in our last, just earlier at the start of this summer, as we were just making sure we knew who wanted to remain in consideration, they said they were still interested, though they are exploring other options. So we are keeping them on the list.
Oh, okay. I thought that had been decided. You mentioned that basements are not allowed. How does that affect Lansdowne's plans to put a pool in? Will they be able to dig down for a pool?
The detailed design would have to be examined to make sure that if they need to dig down, they can do so safely, but that the pool could not occur below ground level.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Morton. Councilor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Tara, not Nicole. Just for public reference, I'm speaking with Tara right now. Tara, I appreciate the efforts so far to clear up the water, the runoff water from about I don't know, a quarter of the city into Shell Creek Park, and the traps that you're building there, or you're proposing to build. But along the lines of Councillor Utley's question, will we be taking any further measures to further purify the water leaving the lake going into the Oxbow? I know I've asked this question before. I apologize if I am asking it too often, but I do have concerns about the possible state of the lake itself right now, and the effect that is having on the Oxbow.
So I'll let Nahed provide a more detailed response. I know that much of the solutions for the cleanup of the lake and canal have to do with improving the source of water so that urban runoff to those systems are filtered and cleaner as they go into it. That's my understanding, but I know that there are short and medium and long-term approaches to doing that. I can find out more from Nahed.
Do we have follow up, Mr. Chair? Do we have a history of samples taken?
They
Coming in
did
and going out? Yeah.
Right. My understanding is there was an environmental assessment that was completed, and therefore detailed results of the water quality were analyzed.
All right. Thank you, Tara.
Thank you. I don't see any more questions, so I'll have some of my own. Tara, what do we need to do to move forward with both the Canadian Industrial Heritage Committee's proposal and the proposal for Lansdowne? What is needed for us to move that forward to council?
I'll start answering this question, but I will turn to our legal city solicitor to also take that question. So right now at this stage, we have identified the list of groups that have shown interest to date and confirmed that there are no issues with the land use compatibility. And therefore, like I said, the plan sets the table should any of these, should this working group want to approve any of these land uses. Having said that, there's only so much land available in the area and a fairly lengthy list of groups who want some piece of it. So a process needs to be put in place to help this working group make recommendations to council. So I am going to turn it now over to Heidi to elaborate on that.
Through the chair and to the chair, Heidi DeVries, City Solicitor. I will just qualify one thing because the CIHC is a little bit different than some of the other interested parties, given the council resolution from 2013 actually, that staff be directed to negotiate a lease. That direction was conditional on a few things, namely an outstanding appeal with respect to a previous planning decision that has been withdrawn. I can confirm that. And so at this point, and the other issue was actually not in the council resolution, but it was a practical issue with respect to the registration of the CPU. So that's the certificate of property use, which would be incorporated by reference into the lease because it does contain the owner and occupier obligations. Now that that has been filed, and I believe, Tara, that was in May, we're able to move forward. And so we will be reaching out to that particular group with the draft lease that we've had sitting for a while now, waiting for us to get to this point. And so with respect to 66 Mohawk, the use of those lands has already been set aside by way of a council resolution. The lease is still contingent on final council approval. So a report to council would have to be forthcoming for signing authority for that particular lease. So it's really just subject to agreement on the terms. But that is different than what we're talking about here with respect to the rest of the interested groups and a process that we would like to put in place to ensure fairness and consistency and transparency with respect to how we handle the requests for either the use of ownership or ownership of those lands. And so working with this group legal and real estate intend as well to work with the planning department to make sure that we have some parameters in place for your consideration. And so that you can move forward with a proposal to council as to how to handle these requests. So there are a number of different ways that we can look at that. And as you can see from the list, a lot of really great organizations doing amazing work in the city of Brantford that I'm sure that will have different ideas as to how they wish to use the property or occupy the property.
So when do you see a recommendation? You think that'll be ready for the next meeting of this committee in October, that you would have a recommendation that we could then forward to council on the process for the applications to come forward in a holistically manner?
So we're hoping for that. I'm not sure exactly when the meeting date is. I know that there's currently a lot on the plate of our real estate manager, who is helping with this process as well as of the planning department. Some of that work has already been undertaken. So I'm not sure if we will have a fully fleshed out process by then, but certainly some parameters for consideration by the committee, so that you can tell us whether or not we're moving in the right direction, or if you want to go in a completely different direction, because this process could look very different depending on what your ideas are. So if you're looking for instance, one major tenant and we have a lease, or if you're looking to carve up the property and dispose of portions of the property to different owners, if you're looking for sort of a service hub, so you have an anchor organization who's then subleasing in order to support their own build and operation. So there are a number of different ways that council could do this. Or if you retain ownership, and then you build a facility, for instance, which I'm not saying any of these are recommendations, and then you manage the leases, because we also know that some organizations, without any statement to whoever's on the list, are also reliant on either grants or donations or government funding, which can be precarious in certain economic environments. And so I think that our recommendation will also have to consider the long-term sustainability of whatever is built on this property, right? In order to ensure that what you have here is a vibrant center for various services being provided to this community.
Okay, thank you. Well, I just want to find a way to move this forward, this project forward to council. So that would come forward. We wouldn't schedule our October meeting until you had that those options available for us for the committee to decide. But I would suspect that the committee would want all of council to be involved in whatever the options were. So we would be recommending the options as a whole to council for discussion. Any other members of the committee wish to speak to this item? Seeing none, then 3.1.
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, this has been dragging on for a while, and not for any particular reason other than COVID, a major part of it. But it would be nice to start moving this thing along a little quicker. And of course, as funds become available as well. So I agree with you, Mr. Chair, that let's find a way of speeding this up a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you. And I guess I would have a question to the councillor for the area, Councillor Van Tilburg. Do you think we require another public meeting as part of this process moving forward?
I think this is such a great project, and the community has been engaged from the get-go for now a few decades. Showing what the direction that we're going is absolutely bring it to the public, let them see. I was just sitting here kind of in awe. I know these are our plans and this is the way we're going, but I just, I look at it again, I hear everything's going, I hear the direction, and I'm sitting here with a great big smile on my face, because it's gonna be so good to the community. So, having a public meeting showing something that's really cool, really good to the community, and that they've all put a lot of time and effort in. I mean, if you listen to that the last meeting had 600 people input. Wow, that's huge. And people have been coming out to these meetings over and over again. Now, obviously the COVID had set us back from our public meetings. And I mean, that's been our biggest set of engagement. So how we do it in the future, whatever, but absolutely, when you start floating some of these proposals that are out there, the Lansdowne proposal that's sitting in the wings, I mean, I think the community is going to go, this is great. This is exactly what we were looking for. You can already hear even when Lansdowne's talking about where are we going to go up the trails, and we're all talking about how we're going to clean up the canal. These are dreams that the community has had, and it looks like that these can come forward. So we'll be seeing what the timelines are, but reminding people what it is and how they've had their say in this all the way. Oh yeah, I would look forward to that public meeting. In a short answer.
Thank you. Nicole, did you have a comment?
Yes, I did. Thank you. As you can see, we're having some technical difficulties. My name is Nicole Wilmot. I manage long-range planning. I'm not Patrick Booster. I just wanted to clarify. So planning staff had intended to bring forward the final Mohawk Lake District Plan to Council for consideration in November. That's our target date. And I just wanted to clarify, are you suggesting that we have an additional public meeting on the Mohawk Lake District Plan aside from the public meeting that would occur at council, because the proposals and the recommendations with respect to the community groups and the location of the community groups is really a separate process outside of the land use planning study for the Mohawk Lake District Plan. So I would suggest that if we're having another public information center to inform the public on the final results of the Mohawk Lake District Plan, which really haven't changed from our last PIC that we've had, that would delay our final bringing forward of that plan to council in November.
If I could comment to that, I'm not looking for a delay. I'm looking for the engagement with the public. It could actually be after that meeting, but I mean, getting back in contact with the public on this subject doesn't always happen at a council meeting. We cover a lot of things, so this is a big project, and it means so much that bringing it forward again. And you're right, things really haven't changed, and that's good, because we don't have to. There's no curveballs here. And you know, sometimes people need to be reminded, what are you guys doing? Well, man, look what we're doing. So I don't want to slow anything down.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. And I will say that there are many projects occurring within the Mohawk Lake District as a whole. This is really just one piece to set the stage for the land use planning component. We fully intend that or anticipate that as those projects continue moving forward, such as the cleanup of Mohawk Lake, that there will be further engagement on plans and projects that are happening within the district. And then not to forget as well that as we begin to receive planning applications for the lands within the district, there'll be further consultation with respect to those applications as well.
Thank you, Nicole. That clarifies it. Now, can I get a mover for all items of consideration 3.1 to 3.3? Councillor Van Vanderstelt and Councillor Martin. Any separation? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed?
You're muted again.
Item 4.1 is the minutes of the meeting, and there is a correction in the minutes. I noticed and did staff get the correction? The correction was that it made the assumption in the minutes that the Lansdowne was one of the homes that wanted to be included, but they actually are one of the homes. So not hope to be, they are. So did that correction get noted?
We'll make sure to make that change.
So then I'll look for a mover of the minutes 4.1. Moved by Councillor Utley, seconded by Councillor Martin. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Okay. There's no resolutions. There's no notice of motions. The next meeting will be at
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I had my hand up. I just want to make a comment, if I may. And it's really, it's just an idea, and I'm just aiming this towards the Ward 5 councillors, where because of COVID, it's very, very difficult to hold public meetings these days. And I wonder if the Ward 5 councillors may want to approach Maria Versace and look at making a video with a presentation, nice slick job that can be shown on Rogers Television, And at the end of it, have maybe a call in to a panel or the councillors. It's just an idea of, in the absence of being able to have a public meeting, one if there's, another way of doing that in the interim. So I'm just throwing that out as an idea.
Sure. And at the next meeting, I want to throw something else. So, I've been chairing it and Councilor has been vice chair, and I think it's time for at least to revisit the chair and vice chair. I feel a little out of sorts when it's I'd like to see Ward 5 in there. I'm happy to do it. No, don't get me wrong, but I just wanted to Ward 5, but it's been so long, and that'll be on the agenda for the next meeting. Is there any other business for the committee? Seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good job. See you, everyone. Thanks, Tara.